No.
It seems to be definitely everyone's in the same learning curve all around the planet at the moment. However professional they look, all sorts of shenanigans seem to happen
Yeah,
everywhere.
right.
Yeah, I mean, it's very.
Where are you, Nicola?
I'm in the UK,
Oh,
in
lovely.
just outside of London. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you local to Madonna or
I'm an hour and a half or a couple of hours west of Madonna, inland.
right? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Priya,
Well, it's
is that your name?
Yes, hi. I just woke
Hi.
up.
So where have you come in from?
I'm in New York City. I'm in the Bronx. So
Yeah,
I'm in
right.
the States.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
mhm.
So
Excellent.
good evening.
Yeah.
Good morning.
How's New York feeling at the moment?
Uh, I don't know actually. It's pretty chill. I don't really go into Manhattan a lot.
Yeah, right.
Um, so I usually stay at home and have a park here. So it's very calm.
Nice. That's the way to do
Yes.
it.
Mhm.
So, Madonna, do you know, like, how do people find you all around the world? Where's Priya come from? How would how would
I'm
she
from
find you?
I found her on YouTube. I found you on YouTube.
Wow, cool.
For whatever reason, I was looking up like throat chakra something.
Ah,
And
nice.
then I found a
Awesome.
remote healing that you did, and it just happened to really align with what I was going through at the time. So I was like, oh, this is it. I need to subscribe.
Awesome. That's great. And Nicola?
I'm not sure whether I looked up kinesiology or whether I just. I think I must have looked up kinesiology, and I didn't quite finish an osteopathy course, but I did the first 3 or 2.5 years, and I remember one of the other students, we were discussing about muscle testing and kinesiology and saying, because I had loads of issues with the diagnostic process in osteopathy. I felt that we were having to fill in this specific clinical form and somehow shoehorn people into justifying what we did. So we weren't allowed to do anything in the clinic without doing something. Anyway, I
Right.
found it quite challenging to do that. And in the end, I one of these other students said, "Oh, I've got a relative who's an osteopath who only ever diagnoses through muscle testing and kinesiology." And I thought, yeah, that's the way to do it. I mean,
Yeah.
I'd love to learn that. And so we talked about learning it while we were in the course, and the course was too full on. So
Yeah.
as soon as I left the course, that was the first, I knew exactly what I wanted to look up and do. And I
Yeah.
think that's how it happened to you.
And
And I
we've
was
got a couple, sorry.
just saying I was absolutely mesmerized by watching you and it was such a gift because you because you explain what you're doing. I'm literally antenna are going like this trying to pick up all the information as you're doing it, and you're so fast. It's like wow, it's great to it's entertaining and therapeutic and educational to watch you, so thank you for
Yes.
that.
And it's like I don't know how much information's in there. So as I'm putting together my signature system, I just keep on adding to the list of things that. So one of the
Yeah.
ladies who may or may not get on, she's from Hawaii and she's an integrative doctor and a kinesiologist. And, which I think what a powerful gift that is to have that sort of combination. So, and yet her confidence just isn't there. And that's sort of what I'm hoping, like as we sort of move through this, that people just get more and more confident, even just trying some things. Because I remember what it was like. Hey, Jen. I remember what it was like the first time I got my hubby to muscle test. And I don't think I said last night exactly what that was, but what it was I'd gone to an information night about hypertonics, which is something that I integrate into my balances all the time, the PNF stretching and that sort of thing, because they're just so amazing. And once again, the information, and I know we haven't started yet, but the information you get every time you muscle test, it just when you're stacking it in, obviously I stack everything. I'm a big stacker with my kinesiology because when I was taught, it was like, no, don't miss anything. So I was taught some really good techniques for stacking information, which is like save on a computer. So I stack everything in my balances. And I think I stack more than anyone I know. And I see other people and they say, oh, you don't need to stack. It's all energy. It's all in there anyway. And I think, yeah, not the way I was taught, and I don't know whether that's just lazy teaching these days or whether people just can't do it. or whether people feel silly doing it, or whether they've had teachers who can't explain it properly. You know, I don't know what it is, but compared to when I was trained like 27 years ago, you did not miss anything. You stacked everything. So I have been terrified of missing things all this time. So that's one of the modules in the next one, like, because it's big to actually stack correctly. It's really big. You've got to understand the mechanics of it. And it takes a bit of belief and practice and understanding to get it.
I think especially the way you do it, because you're using other stacking methods. I've only ever been taught the way you use the hips. You use the legs and the hips, and you can transfer a stacking to the client or patient. But
Yes.
You use the jaw, and you use, is it the
so the opponent's pollicus longus, as well as the glute medius in the hips, and then the pterygoid muscle in the jaw. And
so those are the two methods I haven't been shown, or I even haven't read about them. I've only learned about pause lock through the hips.
And there's a lot of arguing in kinesiology, as you can imagine. There's a lot of arguing. So it's people sort of believe in their techniques that they've learnt, and then they go with them, and I'm like, well, I know what I know, and I've also proven it on people, you know, so I can actually stack something in as like a party trick. And I say that to my new clients a lot of the time. This is just a party trick, just going to show you something, and I'll stack in some stress with some unlocks, and as long as my feet are apart, they cannot lock those muscles to save themselves. And then the second I pop my feet back together, all the muscles instantly lock. So you know, once you know stuff, you know it. You can't unknow it, and that's the great thing about kinesia.
Is that like on the same, like, you know, last night, I can't remember her name, but she mentioned about when you get to the end of a treatment and someone says to you, well, do I have cancer? And they're asking you a random question.
Yes.
And you say, well, you didn't ask me that before, so I haven't tested on it. When you're talking about stacking, is that doing like you're stacking information then, or is that something else that you're stacking?
No, stacking is every time a muscle unlocks, that's giving you information. But even before it unlocks, you don't know whether that is going to lock or unlock. So therefore, every time when I've got someone on the table, every time I am doing a test, at the moment I'm asking the body at the moment I'm checking something, I'm actually stacking it in. I'm stacking it in before I know whether I don't know whether or not it locks, because you don't know.
So if it doesn't unlock, then you need to work on it more. But so by stacking it
not
in there,
necessarily. Remember the first, second, third stage stress from last night? So if something locks, it can still be second stage stress. So that's why I stack everything in, and that's why I lock everything. That's why I stack everything in, because you don't know whether a lock is balanced or whether a lock is hyper facilitated, overworking. I know.
Okay. All right. Thank you for at least half clarifying that for my brain.
What you just said, Madonna, I think either I misheard or it's different from what I expected you to say, which is, did you say that you stack it in before you test it, or just after you've tested it and you've got the result, then you stack?
No, at the second that I am testing the muscle, the second before I know the result, that's the moment I'm stacking.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's completely different from what I've been told.
Yeah. It is a bit of a concept. And it's obviously more advanced. And even in Touch for Health, which is, you know, more like basic kinesiology, that's what you're talking about, using just the hips. So every time a muscle unlocks, if you're stacking it in, you've got to get the whole connection with what you're doing. And that's why I actually have another one as well. You know, when I'm holding onto the shoulder, so someone starts telling their story and I grab their little shoulder and it looks like I'm being really kind and sweet and loving because I've got my hand on their shoulder. That's actually a storage spot. It's called a circuit retaining mode. So it looks like I'm just being loving and kind and sweet, which of course I am, but it's also grabbing and storing information. So that's another, I think that's out of, sorry?
Are you storing the information for yourself or for her body, like, or the person's body?
That's so. Remember last night we were chatting about it being like it was sort of like a algebraic equation.
Yeah.
So as you're going through, everything you stack in, every lock or unlock has a story associated with it. So if someone's got, say, a whiplash is a really classic combination of muscles that are unlocking and muscles that are overlocking. So with a whiplash, you've got all of the neck muscles that can't lock to save themselves. And once you get them locking, then you activate the rear neck muscles and then you recheck the front neck muscles and they fall apart again. That's a classic whiplash. But imagine what else goes hand in hand with a classic whiplash. So just say it's a car accident. So you've got the car accident. You've got the actual injury. You've got, holy crap, what's this going to cost me? You've got what is everyone going to say? Is this going to require the police? You know, there's so much more to that combination than just the whiplash. So they did a study on derby car drivers. Have I said it right? In America, derby car drivers. And they looked, and on average, they do about 20 whiplashes a year. But they don't have chronic pain because for them, that's their life. It's their fun.
It's just fun.
Yeah, it's fun. So they have a whole different thing. It doesn't matter if they crash the car. That's part of the fun. You know, they've got a team. They've got the money. You know, they know it's an expensive hobby. It's an entirely different thing than if I go out in my $30,000 car and run into a Mini up the road. It's an entirely different bunch of symptomatology and emotional complex. And our muscles can store all of that in a heartbeat.
Right, right.
Welcome,
so
everybody.
How do you...
Hi, Tracy. Hi, Kim. Hi, Mark. Hey, Marissa. You're awake. Well done. Hey, Karen. Yeah. How do I say your name? Keslaki?
It's Deb.
Oh, shit. That's right. Oh, sorry.
Karen.
That's right.
Karen.
Karen,
It is
Karen and Deb. Sorry. I did know that.
it is Deb, but because I just had Keslake's iPad when I registered it, and it always comes up with Keslake. But yes, it's Keslake, not Keslaki. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No, it's absolutely fine. It's not roots. It's all good.
Yes. Beautiful. So how did everyone feel at the end of last night? Got some new information?
Yeah.
It's great. It was great yesterday.
Yeah. So I'm the Moro reflex. Did we see that today? Did anyone have a look at the Moro reflex?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I watched the video. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you seen that exercise? Who's seen the exercise before? The Moro reflex exercise?
No.
Anyone? Okay. Because it's something that we can use all the time for anyone who's in anxiety and depression, stress, immune system issues, lockdown fever, fear of politics. No, sorry, only joking. So it's something that this exercise, who hasn't seen the exercise? The Moro reflex exercise. Okay. So
I saw it today, but I hadn't seen it before.
Yeah, right. So it's in the Kickstarting Kinesiology group, and I also sent it through with the emails today. So hopefully you'll be able to find it in one of those areas. But the reason it's so powerful and the reason I just love it, and when we're after things that we can do in our own worlds, it's so powerful, is that every time we do that exercise, we're helping to create new pathways from the front to the back of the brain. So it's lying on the back. I'll sort of describe it for those people who haven't seen it yet. So it's lying on the back, arms and legs crossed like you're an upside down cockroach, and your legs are coming in like a little fetal position. So that's the aim. Think of it more like a lotus flower rather than a cockroach. But basically, arms and legs nice and imagine yourself in a womb, because that's where this is set up. So in the womb, in our mother's womb, can I say mother in this show? Okay.
Yep.
Please do.
Yeah.
Please do.
So basically, as you open out those arms and legs really, really slowly, and this is the exercise lying on your back, your arms and legs should take about 30 seconds to come out to about this sort of position, and same with the legs. hold for a couple of seconds, and then you come back in for another 30 seconds. Now that exercise we will not have done since we were in the womb. So therefore, the process of doing it is making that little brain of ours go, what the heck is that? What's going on? So the brain is trying to find the closest to that exercise. And if you haven't done it since the womb, it's going to that process in the rear of your brain. So therefore, has anyone ever seen, I'll have to try to find it. I was looking for it and I couldn't find it, but there's a picture of just in underneath the frontal cortex, all of the neurons that connect to different muscles in the body. Does anyone have that chart that they can? No. Okay. So there's, and basically in underneath here, it has, you know, there's the lips and the legs, and there's all these little body parts just in underneath here. So just by moving our body, we're activating all this stuff here. But the memory of the action that we're doing is in the rear of in the rear of the brain, in our it's not the basal ganglia, but it's in our survival mechanisms. Because that exercise, the Moro reflex, it's a survival mechanism. So anyone who's running in survival all the time, it's going to be useful to do that exercise every day. So and every time we're doing it, we're helping to reconnect from here to here. And you can imagine if you're lying on your back and opening out your arms and legs, you're actually helping all of your abdominal muscles as well. So you're going to automatically be strengthening your core. And who can guess what it feels like when you're coming back in? It's amazing how heavy your arms and legs are. So by the time you're coming back in, it's incredible because your arms and legs, especially the first few times, they will be shaking like crazy because they haven't done it before. We're using gravity on every muscle in our body when we're doing this exercise. It's incredibly powerful. So if we think, and I had a little list that I was having issues with Canva today, but basically I'll pop it in our Kickstart Kinesiology group as well tomorrow with the big list of emotional gear and physical gear and immune system stuff that this Moro exercise can actually help. Now, in the primitive reflexes, so when you're in the womb, there's a whole bunch of primitive reflexes, a whole bunch of them, where basically they start with one and they move on to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. So if one of them's jammed, they can jam all of the others. So there's lots of them. Hey, Michelle. Hey, Sana, Vicky, Judy. Hello, hello, hello. So there's so many things that we can, when we're doing this Moro exercise, there's so many things that can actually help in the body. It's one of these core things that can help so much. I had a lady years ago who, as soon as I started chatting to her, I knew she had a Moro. She would walk to the train each morning, and every time there was a noise, and she had this perfectly manicured hair, perfectly manicured. And it was very annoying for her because every time she would hear a noise, she would jolt, because that's the thing. If you've got a Moro exercise, if you've got a Moro reflex still active, there's a noise, your arms go up. If someone slams the door, you jolt. I used to watch Alien with my friends, and my friends would say, okay, Madonna, put down the cup of tea, that bit's coming up. And I was watching Alien like just on the weekend, and literally I was like holding it going, it's going to be okay, it's going to be okay. You know, so I still have a Moro reflex. According to watching Alien on the weekend again. It was sort of funny. I haven't felt that for a while, but I was going, oh, okay. Gee, something's activated it again in the last 3 years. It makes no sense. Haha. So hormones can activate Moro reflexes. Injuries and accidents can activate Moro reflexes.
Sorry, Madonna, are you saying it can be reactivated by a stressful period?
Absolutely. So
okay.
it's like a bell curve. So it depends whether if it's actually gone naturally and it is gone, it can't come back.
Okay.
But if it's been jammed, you know, and your body has hit a spot, like just say, you know, it's on its way up to being fully activated, it's about crawling out the birth canal. So basically the Moro reflex is for strengthening those muscles so you can crawl out the birth canal and come out into the world. So as soon as there's things like cesareans and the use of forceps and all of the injections that happen throughout the birth and throughout the pregnancy, so anything that is traumatic for the mother in the womb can activate a Moro reflex, so that, because what the Moro reflex says is life's going to be tough. This is never going to be easy again. So if you have that primitive reflex running in the back of your brain, it's going to be tough moving forwards. So how many people do we know like that, they've got that vigilance just running all the time? Their brain is constantly on the lookout. So all of the things that you see me do in my YouTube videos when I'm talking about the reticular activating system and running on vigilance and shutting down the serotonin and activating noradrenaline and acetylcholine. So it activates all these hypervigilant things and shuts down all the things that allow us to de-stress. The Moro reflex is one of the things that can really make a huge difference there, because it's an exercise that we need to do each day. And you can do it morning and night, but it doesn't help to do it 10 times in a row. That's not that useful, because each time you do it, it's just going to be going, oh, okay, frontal cortex, what's going on here? And then it says, where's that pattern? Where is that little process that I just did? And then it goes, here it is.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, so with this woman who had the perfectly manicured hair, the reason it was a problem for her is that she told me what happened on her way to, but she used to mess up her hair every day, because instead of looking like an idiot walking to the train and going, ah, she would actually go, and she'd run her fingers through her hair. So she said, I've got to do something about my hair. And I thought, really? That's an odd thing for someone to come and tell me. So yeah, so the Moro reflex is incredibly powerful. But then other things that happen after that, there's one called the rooting reflex or suckling reflex. So some people are really sensitive here. So I've got a friend, whenever I'm doing kinesiology and there's a whole bunch of, sort of acupuncture points that we access in here, because this is central vessel 24, central vessel 23. This is one of the governing meridian points. So when you're stacking in all those things, and she's not the only one, I've had maybe 15 people over the years that I can sort of visualize, but as soon as you turn away, they do a little bewitched thing, because they can't stand it, because their rooting reflex, because of the Moro reflex, has been jammed. So it will have messed with their ability to breastfeed. And it's amazing how often these things can affect us later on in life. Because if you've got your Moro reflex and your suckling reflex jammed as an adult, it's really going to mess with you down the track, because that's going to be about bonding and security and all of that other stuff. It's not just about an exercise. Nothing is ever about anything simple, is it? It's
So Madonna,
connected.
Madonna, my chiropractor is actually working on me at the moment to get my Moro reflex working again, because he says it's just not there at all. So it would only be if it was jammed that he would be able to get it going again.
Well, yes. So if it's gone, there's nothing they can do.
Yeah.
So if it's showing though, it's, because it's easy for it to show, that exercise you do that basically if you stand someone in front of you, there's a funny Frasier episode where Niles and his brother, Niles and Frasier at the psychiatrist, and they're arguing, and that they wouldn't do the whole fall back into each other's arms because the psychiatrist saying, I don't even think you guys should be friends anymore, much less brothers. Give it up. And the psychiatrist stands up and says, come on, it's not that hard. And he stands up and he falls back. And of course, they both ignore him and he lands on his butt. So, because they weren't paying attention. But when we fall back, some people literally can't fall back towards another person. Their primitive reflexes, their Moro reflex is so strong, they can't do it. And you can actually see everything about them. It's sort of like as they fall back, their arms go up, their feet, they lurch forward. They will do everything rather than allow themselves to fall back into someone else's arms, because they just don't have the trust there.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we have a Moro reflex jammed, it really messes with lots of stuff. Are you feeling anything particular, Kim, when he's activating it?
He does all the clapping and everything to see, you know, what was happening. And I have to admit, I am somebody that just never seems to scare. You know, if somebody came around the corner, you know, I'm just like, nah. Or if somebody grabs my leg, or, you know, they get really disappointed because there's no reaction. And I wondered what that was, and he was explaining it to me. And he has just started treating me with, he's got this new laser that he puts on my forehead.
Oh, right. Yeah.
That it was very expensive. That's all I knew. But anyway, I don't know. I mean, he's done 2 treatments so far, so I haven't really noticed any difference.
Yeah. Because so Vicky, yes, with your son's near-death experience, absolutely. There's no way those things can't affect in some way, but some people will seem so cruisy and they'll go, oh no, there's nothing going on there. But people need the right trigger, of course. You know, and you never know what that trigger is going to be until the trigger's there. You know, so it might be a voice. I remember when I was living up in Cooktown 28 years ago when I was studying naturopathy, and there was a particular lady, and I did not know why she creeped me out. Like, it was awful, and there's not many people that creep me out, but there was something about her voice, and I honestly didn't know what it was. And it wasn't until I moved back down to Brisbane and I was chatting to someone, I went, oh, there it is. And it was the voice. It was exactly the same voice. And I hadn't realized, but as soon as I ran into my ex, whatever that was, and I can't even remember why that person was a thing for my brain, but it was, and I had literally forgotten. Your beautiful little bubby there, Sana? Sana? Yeah. Hello. Yeah, little cutie pie. Hey, Anna. Yeah, so the Moro reflex is just one of those things that when you do, it's always good to pay attention to people's changes in personality if that happens. So I've got a couple of stories where big things happened. So this is just really good to be aware of. For a start, using all the things we learned this week, you know, to sort of bring people back into their balance, you know, after doing the Moro reflex is a good idea, because the Moro is about protection. So every time you activate it, you can activate the survival stuff that wants to protect you. So I had my friend Linda in New Zealand again. She was treating a woman going back we just learned the Moro stuff. So it's probably 20 years ago. And she went home to New Zealand. I came home to Brisbane. She had this experience where this particular woman, the woman came in, she told her story, and Linda said, oh my God, you've got a Moro reflex. So then she started to go through her symptoms, and Linda went, yep. This is what you've got to do. Showed her the exercise center on a merry way. Now, this was our first experience with someone losing the plot after the Moro reflex exercise. That's why I'm saying be really aware. And it's good to experience it too, by the way. So basically, she ended up in a fetal position for like 3 months. And because Linda hadn't made a follow-up, she said, oh, it's going to take at least, 6 months or a year to get rid of this Moro reflex. Just keep doing it. Pop in whenever you want and pick up supplements. So Linda's walking through the supermarket one day, and there's a woman and a girlfriend. They're walking along, and Linda was like, hey, how you doing? I haven't seen you in months. And the girlfriend was like, don't you dare come near my girlfriend. You've had her in a fetal position for months. Linda was like, what? What's going on? So she had a big chat to her, because they allowed her to have a chat and tell Linda how horrible she was, of course. And but that was our first experience where we went, holy moly, this was a really big response. So she rang me up terrified. Like, Linda was like, I don't know if I can tell anyone to do this again. And yet my response, because it's me, I'm like, imagine the power of that. Like, what has the power to do that? That's going into such a survival mechanism for someone that they don't get out of bed for 3 months. I'm not saying it's a good response, but if she had have known, she would have been able to treat her for it. Because she had the tools to go in and calm down the survival patterns. She had the tools to sort out the neurology in the body. Like, even if she'd just taken something like, potassium, magnesium, and some big compliment, something. There would have been something she could have done. But instead the girls sort of went, oh my God, that's not great. And just sort of, instead of telling her their practitioner, they just hid away. And that's one of the problems being a practitioner, you can imagine. If you don't get the feedback, you're not going to know what's going on. Has anyone ever had that sort of response where they've had a really major response from a client or a major response from a treatment that scared the crap out of you?
Yeah, well, after my daughter was born, I went to a chiropractor who did similar to what you're doing, set the muscle testing and some treatments, and it was quite a traumatic birth, and he put my body back together and I felt great, but the minute I got in the car, it went back out again. And I cried my way out of the car park thinking I've just wasted time and money, and I'm back in the same position as I was when I drove in here an hour ago. And so I still to this day haven't gone back to that person and explained that that's what happened. Now that you say that, I feel like I should have.
Yeah.
And that happened
it's
multiple
interesting,
times.
isn't it, when you have that sort of response?
Hmm.
Oh, and Michelle also had one last year. Yeah, okay. Michelle also had one last year with a kinesiologist. Last year was an emotional wreck. And it really comes down to a lot of the, like just say, if I worked on someone's survival stuff and I just got rid of their survival stuff in the background, but I didn't simultaneously pick up the conscious brain pathways. So you sort of think the survival stuff is there specifically for protection. If we take away survival stuff but don't give the positive integration on the other end of it, then absolutely people can feel like crap afterwards. One of my clients who I saw for quite a few years, she was really energetically sensitive, and she went to a local practitioner who, after this, she really annoyed me, and I once again never referred anyone to her, and I had to hold my face together if anyone said they ever went to see her, because she did 4 past life healings for this woman in 2 sessions. In all 4 past life healings, this was a woman who was a kinesiologist, but she had this real psychic bent, and she was doing these healings for people, which in theory is good. But all 4, she died a tragic, horrible death. So in 2 sessions, she was showed 4 past lives, and when I saw her, she was having panic attacks like 100 times a day. And as I went through the process, I remember her sitting here. Actually, it was this room about 20 years ago. And I remember her sitting here, and she had about 10 panic attacks on the first time I ever met her. And she said, and I said to her, well, did she give you any tips? You know, what tips did she give you to go home with? Did she give you the emotional stress release points? No. Did she give you the central meridians? No. Did she give you the hand holding? No. She'd given her no techniques to go away with, which seemed exceptionally strange given that this woman was a trainer and a kinesiologist and quite well respected in the community. So I don't know whether she was just too busy, whether she was having too much fun with the past lives. But like, I remember a couple of the past lives to this day. They were not fun. And some people go delving into those things, and I've got no problem with whatever people want to do with their kinesiology. But you've got to put people back together again. Your brain can't unsee what it sees. So if you go through a past life with someone because that's your skill and your system, you've got to be able to diffuse it for them. Because if you don't, you're leaving them in a place where they've just got awful visuals. So I've had people who do rebirthing. I had another lady who did rebirthing with, and she ended up in a fetal position for months as well. She's the only person who I've ever found had that. And that wasn't with me, that was with someone else. But I remember her telling me that she, you know, like she would never go back to that practitioner either because it was so traumatic. Follow-ups, yeah, Vicky, and Anna. Yeah, so follow-ups are just crucial. Just checking in on them. Sort of saying, hey, how you tracking? Whether it's a phone call, leaving a quick 20-second message on the phone, just checking in, just making sure you're feeling okay since our balance. It's not hard. You know, it doesn't take a lot of time. I'm very slack on that. Yeah, but I'm more a texter and a messenger girl. I can get that done. But yeah, so we've got to make sure that whatever we're doing with people, we're sort of aware of the other side of things as well. But once again, people are going to be dealing with stuff. People are going to be dealing with stuff moving forward. So we need good healers, and it's just about awareness. So much of it is about awareness. Yeah, right. So Sana's mother had some very awful experiences as well. It's sort of interesting with loud screams and things like that. I've had people who really can't control their body on the table. Some people have really heaving sighs, you know, and it's always really a little bit disconcerting when people are doing odd things on the table. But, you know, I've been doing it so long, nothing bothers me these days. I just stack it in. So, you know, because that's part of the balance as well. And quite often they say, oh, no, I always do this. That's my energetic shift. Some people feel energy in such different ways. Like I never notice anything specific after a balance, but I just know stuff just shimmies away over the next few days. And I often think of kinesiology and energy healing. It's a charge we're shifting. There's like a charge to an emotion or a person or a memory or a trauma. So what we're doing with kinesiology, with whatever we're doing, is trying to dull that charge. If someone's mum died 15 years ago and every time they talk about it, they burst into tears, not that there's anything wrong with that, but there's still a massive charge there. So why hasn't that let go at that point, you know? No, Drew, I haven't heard about holographic kinetics. There's a kinesiology, there is a kinetics, a group of kinesiology training called kinetics, but I haven't heard of holographic kinetics. Have you had that done?
No, I've seen some videos. There's some locally in Brisbane that does it.
Yep.
Stephen, what his last name? But yeah, very interesting stuff. And they can go through past life traumatic stress scenarios and
Not Steve Edom.
No, but I'll send you over some information about it.
Yeah, okay.
Interesting anyway. Just want to get your thoughts if you heard of it.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a course I did about 5 years ago with Charles Krebs. He's one of my gurus. And funnily enough, he's the reason why I didn't like that body talk practitioner, because she was talking down about Charles Krebs. So I had the mama bear energy come out and thought, right, you don't like Charles Krebs? I'm not coming back to you. So Charles Krebs is the reason we have the LEAP program, the Learning Enhancement Acupressure program. So has anyone heard of Charles? No? Yeah, right. Of course you have, Marissa. So Charles, he's amazing. He's amazing. And in 1985, he had a deep sea diving accident. So he was on the Great Barrier Reef. He was studying turtles. He is like a double brain genius. He's like one of these guys that has a, what do you call it, an eidetic memory. He has a perfect memory. So it doesn't matter what people ask Charles. He'll, you know, he's like me. He's got an opinion, but he's got knowledge backing it up. So Charles is amazing. You know, someone will say, oh, how long was that horse that won a horse race in 1936? And he'll just pull it out of his butt. He's just amazing. But what happened was he got a nitrogen bubble in his spine. So he should have been dead. And we were lucky here in Australia. I say we as a collective, you know, energetic healing community, we were lucky that BP or BHP, I can't remember which one, but one of them was on strike down off the bottom of Australia in that Great Australian Bight underneath South Australia. So they flew him from Cairns down there, and because they were on strike, he ended up in one of those deep sea decompression chambers. And he was in there for like 12, 13, 14 days, like the longest time anyone's ever been in one. Well, certainly 5 years ago when I saw him, he still held the record for that. Not that anyone wants to hold the record for something that's trying to save your life. But it was only because they were on strike. So by the time he got out, the deep sea bubble, the nitrogen bubble had dissolved, but he was a quadriplegic. No one expected him to survive. So then he he was in hospital. He also was a black belt in karate. He was like a paleontologist. He was an archaeologist, you know, guru. He taught at Harvard anatomy and physiology. So he was just a smart guy. But his brain still worked and his body didn't. And because he was a black belt karate and because he was very, very good at anatomy and physiology, he just figured rather than watching the big stupid box in the room, he would visualize his pathways because he knew the power of the mind. So every day he would lie there in his hospital bed and visualize the pathways going from his head down to his fingers, back up to his head, from his head down to the feet, back up to the head. And he did that for 9 months and walked out of the hospital. He walked out like a cripple, but he walked out nonetheless. So then he went through a whole bunch of girlfriends over the next 3-4 years, and they were all hippies, of course. And one of them, probably the most hippie of the lot, took him to a 2-hour session of kinesiology with one of the PKP practitioners from New Zealand. Bruce Dew, I think it was. And after 2 hours, he felt like for the first time since his accident, his feet were communicating with his brain. He had not felt like that since his accident. So the reason this is sort of funny too. The reason there's a lot of people around the world who do weird things with their kinesiology is because he was still slightly paralyzed and had partial movement around the place, means that he can't do certain things. So a lot of his students down in Victoria, they would always walk around with their hands on the hip like that because they thought it was part of the thing, but that's because he couldn't actually get his finger together unless it was next to the hip. And Charles couldn't do with the jaw. He sort of, because Charles has this amazing knowledge, he knows that opening the jaw, so we were chatting about the stacking earlier on, in this, there's a massive amount of these little neurons in the pterygoid muscles that allow us to store information. So basically he would open the jaw, wander around the table, you know, with his hands in a weird position. And so anyway, everyone who wasn't Charles, we used to call it the dance of the demented goldfish. Because he just looked so weird. And I think one of his good friends, Gordon Dixon, who I learned from, he just thought Charles looked like a dick most of the time. So he learned to do it with this. So that's how I do it. I do it like this. Looks less obvious, you know, so you can do it. It works. So the Charles.
I always wonder what it is when you're doing that in your YouTube videos. What's she doing with her mouth?
Yeah. So it's and if you are talking, obviously you can't have your mouth being used. So if I'm talking, I will have the stack in either my hand or my hips. If I'm walking, I will have it either in my jaw or my hand. If I'm doing something on the body, I can't have it in my hand. So then it needs to be in my hip or my jaw. So it depends what you're doing with the kinesiology. And that's why there's a fairly big module about that, because, you know, it has to make a bit of sense. But yeah, like, who was it? Tracy, was it you saying about the just using the hips for the stacking? Was that you?
Yeah, it was me.
Oh, Nicola. Sorry. Yeah. So in Touch for Health, basically they talk about using the hips. So just using the hips, using it on the person on the table, using it on the person, you know, the practitioner, and just sharing information that way. But basically, it's a really cool tool to be able to store information.
Yeah.
And when I do hypertonics, like there's so much information that's stored in muscles that are too tight. Because why are the muscles too tight? So as you're trying to release things, you know, all of that, I love stacking in all that energy, you know, so that, you know, there's always emotional gear in there. There's always different chakra stuff going on. You know, things are never as simple as they seem. And that's what I sort of love about it. Judy, do you remember when we did biokinetics? And there's like a hierarchy of corrections. Yeah. And it's never the most obvious one. So if you've got like a structural thing on first, it's never the structural stuff that's the first correction.
I did something interesting on the weekend, and I remembered you stacking, and I could never get it when you were teaching me. But on the weekend, it happened instinctively because I was choking on what we were lifting out of this person as a surrogate for a child. And I had to, like, I'd stacked into my hips, had to put it in my hands, go over to the door and cough and cough and cough and cough because this child was choked and never allowed to talk, like they were never allowed to speak. And it was just ridiculous that I remembered what you were doing just by visually patterning it. I thought, what do I do? I've got to walk away. So straight away just stuck it in my fingers. It was the most instinctive, ridiculous thing. And I'm like looking at my sister going, I don't know what she did, but I remembered whatever else I learned.
Yeah.
So it was magical. But yeah, there were so many things that were not as they presented as a priority. And it wasn't until you peeled away layers that you could get down and you could see that's not really like, that's like somebody comes in the room and they're talking a lot. And then as they calm down, what is really hurting starts to come up. And you got to be patient and let that just happen.
Yeah. And that's what I love about,
beautiful.
Yeah, that's what I love about the layering of balancing, you know, when people are, you know, as we get more and more skilled, because you sort of, all you need initially is find a muscle that's unlocking, do something, and then it locks and you go, hey, that's pretty cool. That's a really neat trick, you know, so that's like step one in kinesiology, seeing that happen. But what's really cool is if, you know, there are lots of finger modes in kinesiology, which I certainly had not thought I would share this week, but I'll just do a really brief overview. There's lots of finger modes that mean different things. So this one is more of the same. This one is more of something else. And once again, I use these so instinctively in the background that I use all sorts of finger modes when I'm working, and it's quite often because I muscle test. You know, when I'm using my little skippy arm, I muscle test so fast that occasionally it'll be going lock, 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 unlock, and then go, oh, what was that? And I have to go back and then recheck which one unlocked because I've got these hierarchies of things in my head and I've got all sorts of lists going on all the time. And yeah, so it's sort of.
Well, getting back into it, Madonna, the 5, was it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things, you know, in the Touch for Health book at the back?
Yes. Oh, that old list. Yes.
Yeah, it's getting me back into it and rebooting so that I can go through and do priorities and then come back and then go through again. Is there another priority? And come back.
Yes.
And it's doing mighty things just by sticking to the list.
Yeah. And always remember to ask the client what the priority is. As a practitioner, you might see the Moro reflex. They might not give a toss about the practitioner, about the Moro reflex. Their priority might be not being able to talk to their husband without crying or yelling. So that's their priority from the emotional perspective. Your brain goes, oh my God, you're in survival, you've got Moro stuff. That's all over their head. They don't give a toss about any of that. They just want you to talk it through in a way that makes sense to them, where they can feel calm and have that charge reduced so that the next time they have that chat. In fact, that was sort of one of my old buddies, Norm. He did a lot of training with me many, many years ago and was a pracky for like 20 years, did really well. And he, one night I was at a dance lesson and Jay and I were dancing for like 6 or 7 years, just ballroom and stuff like that. Anyway, so one night it was our first ever close dancing lesson after like 3 or 4 years or something, or I don't know how long it was. But anyway, so he of course got the chickie babe in the black slinky dress and I got the dude Mario, which was fine. He was nothing wrong with his looks. But nonetheless, I was keeping my beady. We'd been married 25 years. I was keeping my beady eyes looking at him all night. By the time we were on our way home, I knew it had triggered something in my damn brain. I could barely speak to him. It was so bizarre. And so I booked in with my friend Norm the next morning and I told him the story. And he said, you bloody women, you know, you cause most divorces, right? And I said, hey, I'm aware of how crazy this is. Just help me get through it. So by the time I finally sent, and this was on a Monday night, by the time it got to Wednesday morning, I sent my hubby a text message and I said, we've got to talk tonight. And he thought I was going to divorce him. He thought I'd fallen in love with one of our friends who's a naturopath, who, you know, that's really hilarious. But anyway, it is amazing where the brain goes. And And when these things hit, they've hit. There's nothing you can do about that. You've just got to sort it through with whatever techniques you've got up your sleeve. So having flower essences in the home, the emotional stress release points, running your central meridian, doing the morrow exercise, doing whatever we can do to get ourselves back to grounded again is so crucial. Otherwise, that becomes this spiral. And if I hadn't, imagine what would have happened if I didn't know what had happened. I knew something had flipped in my brain. I knew that angry green monster was in there. Like, it was bizarre. Like, honestly, I could still remember the drive home. It was icy and fully ridiculous, like fully ridiculous. But that was my reality that night. And this is the thing about wanting to help people in the world. It's not going to make sense in our brain as a practitioner. It doesn't need to. We need to just hear with an open mind. And honestly, anyone who's been a practitioner for a while, when you start seeing people regularly, you hear the most doozies of stories. And everyone will always say the same thing. Is anyone as messed up as me? And the answer is, sweetie, everyone's as messed up as you. We all just handle it differently. I mean, from that perspective, like we need to be open for people who have been really traumatized. I've had 3 SRAs in the last 3 months, satanic ritual abuse survivors. Now, the first one told me. The second one, she saw a look of recognition on my face when she said it. So therefore she went into her thing and said, oh my God, I've never been able to speak to anyone. The third one told me, and I said, are you an SRA? And he said, and he had this look on his eyes and he said, yes, I am. No one has ever asked me that. So we're going to see things moving forward as people, because this is a time of truth and openness on the planet moving forwards. People are going to need to deal with their stuff. We need to harden up and be able to handle whatever is coming forwards, because otherwise people are going to dig themselves into a hole.
Madonna, can I ask, had you seen any SRA victims before the last 3 years? Because it's
no one who had ever said those words to me.
Yeah.
But I think now there's so much information coming out about the ritual abuses. Like it's not a secret anymore. Don't know if you know, but our government has actually hidden a whole bunch of top level pedophiles for 80 years or 75 years or something. So, there's police. Like I stood for IMOP, a political party, a few years ago. And one of the ladies who stood down the Gold Coast, her husband is a retired policeman because he worked in that area. And every time he would get to a certain level, they were told, don't investigate. So he retired with trauma because he was seeing it every single day and not allowed to do anything about it.
Wow.
There's some hideous stuff going on out there. And my point is, sorry, I don't mean to lower the tone, but my point is that people have stuff and we need to be able to tease that out of them. If they can't talk to us, who can they talk to? Some people have never told their partners. They've never spoken about it in their families. Their kids don't know. Like, imagine having that in there all the time and not speaking about it. Actually, Vicky, you've got, with the physical stuff that you do, I imagine as you put people into those physical positions, does stuff come out?
Yeah, I actually learned EFT in my early days of orthobionomy because, I wasn't as astute to the body's energies at the time. I was just so excited that people were getting better.
Yeah.
And what they say, enthusiasm over experience, which is a wonderful thing.
It is, absolutely.
But I walked into a few traps. I had one woman was sent to me from a psychologist for undiagnosable abdominal pain. Now, if I'd been cleverer, the red flags are like, bing, 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 undiagnosable abdominal pain. There's something weird going on here. And so I started working with her pelvis, because that's one of the first places I check, because if the pelvis is out, everything's going to be out. And most of us in our society have got a pelvis that's not, not completely functional. And she started having reactions. And so I decided to do a check of her energy. I said, I'm just going to walk around the bed and I'm going to ask you to let me know where it is that you feel safe. And strangely enough, the spot that she chose was her trauma spot. She didn't realize that it was a trauma spot. So I stand there and I start to work on it, and she had a massive catharsis. So it was like, okay, we need to change. So we did it again. I said, this time I want you to really pay attention. I want the place that's the least charge, not the one that's the most charge that you think that's where you're safe, the one with the least charge. I ended up having to work with her through a 2-inch window on her right ribs, on the side of her ribs. I had to work through her whole body there. And it was really interesting. I was really inexperienced as a practitioner, but I just asked for guidance because it was like, wow, I've never struck this before. She ended up telling me that she was a sexual abuse victim. She hadn't even told a psychologist.
Yeah.
And that just, once she got it out, it just changed her whole life. Well, within no time, she had a boyfriend, she was driving, all these things that she couldn't do before. It started to change. And it is the body, why I love working with bodies is they never lie.
Yeah. Yeah, my friend Linda again, when she was doing massage, one of the people in New Zealand had developed this holistic rocking process. So lying on the back and the front, but I think it was on the back, just gently rocking the body from side to side. And some areas don't move. So you'll be rocking, say, shoulders, ribs, and all of a sudden you hit around that pelvic area and it doesn't rock. Then you keep going down the legs and the legs start moving and you come back. That's another sign, that there's some really deep held tissue, inflammation and congestion in there. So yeah, thank you, Vicky. Yeah, it's something that you never know where the catharsis is going to come from. And it can be the most simple things. Sometimes it'll simply be that someone is on the table and they're saying, yes, please help me. Like I remember when I was doing lots of training for years and years and years. I was always off at training. That was my holidays for 10 years. And it didn't matter what I was getting on the table for. Like almost instant, and I could feel it every time. I would get teary the second, just the fact that my brain went, you're doing something. Thank you. And it was nothing particularly emotional or anything. It was just like I always felt like it was my body saying thank you. Because my joke was that my son is 36. And my joke was that every time anyone said, so what would you like to work on today? And I'd say, Josh. He was a bit of a challenge. Poor little darling. He'd probably hate it if I told people that, but he was, and it was after his, I saw, looking back on it, he was probably potentially, I don't know, but potentially jab injured. There was quite a neurological thing going on with his poor little brain that might not have been. But yeah. So Michelle, your son led you down this path, huh? Yeah. It's interesting what gets us anywhere, isn't it? Does anyone recognize the Moro reflex in themselves?
Yeah. I'm going to be working on this today.
Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, and the exercise, I'll actually put a video. I've never taped the video. Yeah, big startle reflex. Yeah, so which can be preceding, so startle comes just before the Moro. So, but then, yeah, it can jam everything else, down the track. So the palmar reflex, the suckling reflex is one. I know that I've got a big fat ATNR, asymmetrical tonic neck writing reflex, which means when I write, I can literally write upside down and backwards. So that's not being able to stay across the midline easily. So an asymmetrical tonic neck writing reflex, your body wants to keep everything on one side, so it'll do whatever it can. So, it's another one that can keep the body in a bit of a gait. But once again, you know, when we're looking at the structure of the body, what holds a scoliosis in place is fight flight. So if you can imagine us, you know, scoliosis, the curvature of the spine, this is what your body's doing. If you imagine those muscles on the spine, you've got these ones too tight, these ones too tight, these ones too loose, these ones too loose. You've got one lot of shoulders that is always tight, the other one always loose, because energetically our body is in that fight and flight response. So people blame it on knapsacks and all sorts of things, but Carl Ferrari is the guy who developed NOT, neural organizational technique, about, I don't know, who knows, 30, 40 years ago or something. He'd been a chiropractor for about 30 years when he started thinking, this isn't right. You know, I can't treat people 3 times a week, every week for the rest of their life and not get anywhere. So he started looking at kinesiology, and then he developed NOT, neural organizational technique, which starts at the core. Well, I suppose it does start with cloacals. Cloacals are the areas in our body that help to center us. So we've got the ischial tuberosities, which are our butt bones, our little, like little sitting bones. We've got those little guys. Their name has disappeared from my brain at the moment, but we've got those little guys, and they are about centering us during sex. So they're literally, the cloacals are all about procreation, because procreation is about survival. So then we've got ones on the front as well. You know, we've got the kidney 27s underneath there. So they're sort of ones that help to center the front, the ramus of the jaw. You know, down in here, there's a little dint in our chin. It's sort of like an acupuncture point. So these little guys on either side of the pubic bone. But if they're tender, then that can be a sign that your jaw is holding some tension in here. If these ones are sore, they're kidney 27s. Those are some of the master immune system points, along with kidney 21s on the side of the body. But basically, these ones are also master lymphatic points. So those little guys are, well, they're part of the brain button series. So hand on the navel and rubbing those kidney 27s, that helps to connect the left and right sides of the brain. So doing that anywhere, anytime, to help to reconnect the brain. The second one is hand on the navels and rubbing the top and bottom of the lips, because this is the end of the governing meridian. This is the end of the central meridian. Central and governing are conscious and unconscious, yin and yang. So that helps to connect the top and bottom of the brain. And I always swap hands as well, because that's about polarity. You know, so you never, because some of the pathways in the brain, they come down and they actually cross over at the base of the skull and then go down to the rest of the body. So by swapping hands, it's a nice, quick, easy little way of doing it. And then the third one, and I had a 10-year-old once say, I did this one first once. And he said, why'd you do that one first? And I'll show you why. Hold your hand on your navel and rub your tailbone. So I had him doing this one. And then I got him to do this one. He said, I'm not putting my fingers near my mouth now. So anyway, doing it third. It's a good little one. So it's rubbing the tailbone. Now the tailbone, your dura attaches to the tailbone. Your dura is around your spinal cord. So by rubbing the tailbone, we're activating our kundalini. We're activating our spinal cord energy. Our dura, because it's around the spinal cord, the dura attaches C3, side of the neck. It also attaches in the tip of the skull, the sphenoid bone, and the jaw. So it's quite a cool process when you sort of think about the dura, and when people are getting migraines all the time and compressed spine, disc bulges and all of that sort of thing, there's no way their dura is not involved. So the dura is very cool. And it's sort of like on the inside of the skull, I think. Is it, Vicky? Do you know that one? Or Marissa? I think it's on the inside of the skull, and it holds.
So yeah, we've got the arachnoid and the duramata, and they are the membranes that hold the fluid that protects the brain. So our brain is encased in this hydraulic system, so that when we do get, every 2-year-old has had one huge bump on their head, sometimes once every week, and so it protects the brain. So I was told it was C2 where it attached. And
Okay.
I find when people have their C2 out of plumb, it really diminishes their memory, it disturbs their sleep. And all my scoliosis clients have a C2 out of place, all of them. I tell them that your head's not screwed on straight, darling. Let's get that right, hey? And because the other thing about the neck, when C2's not in place, the head doesn't sit straight. So it tends to sit either to the side or off center. And, if I put a ruler here, and sometimes a ruler lands like somewhere in the middle of their chest, but once their neck is in place, sometimes the scoliosis will start to resolve. It's quite interesting. But yeah, C2 is really, really important. And if you've got that torque in the duramata, we've got a hydraulic system that starts at the coccyx, and every time we breathe, our coccyx and our sacrum moves just a tiny bit, but it also, our occiput moves. So have this very, very gentle pump, which is how, cranial osteopaths work. So if C2 is out of place, or anything in the sacrum and lower back, then we don't have that pump working. So we don't have the full nutrition, because our brain uses a massive amount of nutrition, like 40% of our calories and most of our good quality nutrition, which is why when they start talking about how food makes a difference to people's mental health. But the one quick thing I want to mention, if I remember, I'll put it up in the group. There's a fellow who did a TED talk called What We Learned from 85,000 Brain Scans, or something like that it was called. And he was a psychiatrist. No, he was a radiologist who became a psychiatrist, and he started looking at brains to see, he said psychiatry is the only profession that doesn't look at the organ that they treat.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so he's he started looking at it and started finding that people had holes where they had old trauma, and that once they started working with that, then their old trauma resolved. It was pretty interesting stuff. So yeah, I'm pretty sure it's called What We Learned from 85,000 Brain Scans. It's TED Talk.
I think his name's Daniel Amen, I think.
Possibly.
I have seen that TED Talk. It was excellent. And then went on to find further.
Very moving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Carl Ferrari, when he was developing the NOT, he developed a little process for moving the brain with, or the skull, sorry, with kids with learning problems. But the chiropractic system in the States wouldn't allow him to do chiropractic and get rebates from the health fund or whatever the equivalent is over there, unless there was a structural problem. So what they started doing was taking x-rays of all these kids before they would then treat them for the learning problems. What they found is that 95% of them had scoliosis.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because what happens when we have learning problems, where generally we don't feel very good about ourselves, we're out the door before the teacher even starts to talk, energetically, physically. We're on that way out. Yeah, so what a surprise. Everything is connected. Everything's connected. So I'm going to put up in the group tonight, if anyone's on the Kickstarting group, I want sort of to have a bit of a think about where you feel like your knowledge is and where you want to go, so that you can sort of, like Like for the rest of the week, I've got a few things that I'm planning on. But if there's anything particularly that is, obviously I love my brain stuff. I love my structural stuff. I love, we'll do a bit more of the self-muscle testing chat tomorrow night as well, you know, for those who have never done that, because I think that's a really powerful tool. I'll try to find one of my old, I'll try to find a video on YouTube that I've done in the past and share it in the group as well. I just ran out of hours in the day today, mainly because technology was lots of fun. So scoliosis, yeah, so scoliosis can be treated or cured with energy healing, because scoliosis is 90% of the time, a lot of it is, you know, it's emotional stuff holding the structural stuff in place.
Excuse me, Madonna.
Incredible.
That makes me look at my grandmother a whole lot differently. She's had that all her life, and now watching she's in her 90s, and just watching her age, not well, and with the scoliosis, that makes a big, there's a lot of explanation there around.
Yeah. Yeah, and doing the things like the Morrow exercise, because that's going to strengthen all your muscles simultaneously. But I will actually give you a quick example of a friend of mine, Amanda. She is a naturopath and kinesiologist as well. Thanks. She came to see me about 25 years ago, and her scoliosis was at the percentage where it started impacting on her lung energy. And I had literally just learned NOT. So she was my first ever experiment. I had the books on the thing. I just went through the books, went one by one. I can't remember, but it was like 4 or 6 hours of treatment, and we got her scoliosis down to 2%.
Wow.
She was also, I've got to say, she was incredibly tenacious. Her doctor, because do you know the scoliosis operation? This will give you all, can I give you all nightmares tonight just for fun? No, it's supposed to enthuse you never to have a scoliosis operation. But what they do, excuse me for a sec. Got it. Okay, so our little spine. So what they do in a scoliosis operation is rip off all the spinous processes. They take them off one by one. They drill a hole at the top. They drill a hole at the bottom, excusez-moi, and then they put these 2 rods either side. And then they get wire like they are building a fence. And where it's all bent, they pull the bones towards the rod. It is a horrific operation.
Madonna, I've got a cousin.
Straighter afterwards, but the muscular stress is still there.
Yeah.
So there was a time about 10, 15 years ago in the States when some delightful big pharma company had a quality control issue. And there were people whose spinal thing was breaking and they couldn't do anything about them. So the scoliosis operation is absolutely horrific.
It's too late once they've had it.
Yeah, they could not remove those things because all the spinous processes are gone. They've ripped them all off.
Oh my God.
Spinal processes. Madonna, I know an 18-year-old and a 12-year-old that have had that done in Toowoomba. They must be so, like, for them to do that, that's to 2 people I know. That's crazy.
It's bizarre. And most of the time people don't know. So we got shown the operation when we were learning NOT. That was part of the modules. And but I'm sure I've given you enough of a visual, you know, without needing to see the operation. But it's yeah, right. Your mother-in-law had an operation, and at the end she was 7 centimeters taller. That's a lot of curve in the spine, isn't it? You know, with an operation like that. Yeah. And you can imagine, because the musculature is still in there, that pattern of fight and flight is still in the nervous system. So if you don't get rid of that, then with whatever tools we've got. So whatever tools we've got to calm down that nervous system, to stop that body pulling those muscles out, it's just really quite crucial to calm that down. And I don't care whether, you know, like even things like flower essences and things like that, you know, a skilled flower essence or homeopath or things like that. But there's a real structural component too. But I hardly ever do the structural scoliosis stuff. I mean, I've got that in my books and stuff, and I've learned it all. And that's what I did with my chick Amanda going back 20 plus years ago, because that's the tools I had at the time. I don't think I'd learnt LEAP at that stage. So I think I had the structural stuff, hypertonics, and some basic touch for health or something. But anyway, it was amazing, because I can't remember the percentage, but it was getting close to a 20% curve. So yeah, it was impacting badly. And her surgeon could not believe that she had reversed it. Everything is possible. Everything is possible.
After this week, I believe you.
And that's the sort of thing, you know, yes. Well, besides the fact that obviously I love sharing information, I really feel like this is a big turning point on the planet at the moment. I really feel like it's time, you know, to we need good healers out there.
Is it possible to group little bits together so that we have got like little pages to pull out when we find, like you were doing the little spots on your chest and your chin and stuff, so that we've got memory joggers to know what to do, so we do the process properly?
Well, that's sort of what I'm planning on putting together for the, you know, the courses coming up, Judy.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I can type if you need typing. I need the list.
I'll keep that in mind.
Please do, because I can remember lots and I go through the book, flicking all the pages. It's like, where is it?
Yeah.
We need memory jogger pages.
Yeah. Any final questions for tonight? So what have you learned? What have you learned tonight? What are you happy with?
I was going to talk about last night, but it's okay.
Oh, talk about last night. That's cool.
I watched it today. So I just, you know that I'm a swear sometimes when I'm teaching self-testing. And I noticed last night nobody talked about sway testing. So I just wanted to see if anybody does that. But when I'm testing myself, if I sway test, it's more honest than if I do the test. So a lot of times my own muscles will come into effect when I'm testing my own self. So when I'm testing myself, I do the sway because, so how the sway works, for those who don't know, is that you're just standing and you're going to ask your body the yes or no question. Your body's going to move towards what it wants and away from what it does not want. So you're going to sway forward if it's something your body needs, away from something. My husband actually sway tests watermelons in the grocery store. It's so embarrassing, but he does. He's very obvious about it too. He's not discreet with his testing. But anyway, it's just another form of testing. And then when I'm testing a dosage, then I'll do the how many do I need? And then I'm okay. But to get the yes or no to begin with, a lot of times that's an easier one to learn.
Has anyone ever tried the sway testing?
I have.
Yeah,
I have. Yeah.
And how have you gone with it?
It didn't work for me.
If it doesn't work, then a lot of times your polarity is off and you need to do some switches.
Oh.
What's the switches?
The switching.
Oh, that's the.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right, right. Okay.
And by doing those, and the cheat for that is anti-clockwise over the heart, just by the way. So that's the quick, easy little way of balancing this, tailbone, and these little guys. So anti-clockwise tapping over the heart. But then you don't know what's going on. And I know at the moment we're just sort of doing them, but you can imagine once we can self-muscle test and once you can stack in this one then go, oh, that one's okay. Stack in the tailbone. And you know, so you can stack in each one and see which one you need. But it only takes a few seconds to do them all. But anti-clockwise over the heart is the cheek for that. I think
So
that
is it, if you're not getting a clear reading, you mean?
yeah,
Just to
so
make sure
that helps to
it's centered?
rebalance your brain. So it helps to bring you
Yep.
back into center.
Yep. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So anti-clockwise over the heart, and then you
Yeah.
can do switches,
Yeah.
and then you can re-muscle test.
Yeah. And that's from either biokinetics or heart healing. Can't quite remember, somewhere along there. Yeah, it's a good one. It's a nice, quick, little, easy one. I have that. And because people are dealing with stuff the whole time on the table, even if it's quite subconscious, I do that every circuit. You know, I sort of do bits and then I come back and I do it. And I, you know, so that's just a constant for me when I'm working on people, so that, you know, we keep on calming their energy down. I remember it might have been Charles Krebs actually, in a training where he would not allow anyone to hold ESRs or give someone hankies or something during a balance because he wanted people to let it out. Whereas I have experience being on the table, actually with my friend Norm, and he wouldn't hold up because, okay, so Norm's a funny human being. Because he knew he had a big fat moro reflex, and he also felt like he was energetically sensitive, so he could take on other people's crap, he would actually avoid touching the body when he was doing anything emotional because he didn't want any of his crap to go through to the client. Whereas, have you ever had that moment when you're in a session with someone and they say, well, tell me why you need this, and you can't answer it because your brain isn't working? They say, well, why do you want that? You know, and if the more people ask, the more it shuts down. If your brain is shut down and you don't have an answer, it's because you don't have any energy coming to your frontal cortex. You don't have the words and the thoughts there. They're not there. So I remember lying in this, I'm sure it wasn't the one about my hubby and I, but anyway, whatever it was, I was lying on the table and I ended up just putting my hand on my forehead to allow the energy to come to my frontal cortex so that I could think, so that I could answer his question, because it was not coming. So when our brains are blank because we're traumatized, that's when bringing that blood to the frontal cortex is so powerful. Or doing these little combo guys or the anti-clockwise, but this one's crucial. We've got to get that blood to the frontal cortex. That's why Reiki is so powerful. We're just adding energy to specific areas in the body. And that one's the third eye. How powerful is the third eye? They've been trying to shut that down on the planet for over 80 years. I saw something today that the pineal gland sops up more fluoride than any other tissue in the body. Any other tissue. That's why, and that's the seat of our spirituality. So when we're acidic, when we're drinking fluoridated water, it's going to the pineal. It stops our courageousness. It stops our ability to be open and see what's going on. Got to purify your water. Got to save your little pineal gland. Got to keep yourself alkaline. You know, and that's why the apple cider vinegar and water, the borax, you know, the little bits and pieces we can do, you know, our green leafy veggies, you know, good quality proteins. We've got to look after our little pineal gland. Really important.
I saw something recently that said the Bragg's no longer has the mother in it. So just to keep an eye on it, making sure that we're going to, you know, health food shop buying a apple cider vinegar with the mother. Apparently they took that out.
Yeah, right. Did everyone see the picture in the chat that Vicky shared about the scoliosis surgery?
No.
So there's a delightful little picture in there that that shows what they do. Let's hope none of us ever have to go there.
Crikey. Can I just ask a question about the self-muscle testing? The finger one that you showed us yesterday. If you're self-testing for dosage, is it when it holds firm that it's the correct amount, or when it
that comes down to your intent? So that's the tricky thing. So I'm going to put together what I do in a handout, and I'll share that tomorrow. And because, yeah, it really comes down to your intention. So I'm happy for your
Okay.
intention to be the intention from my handout, because that works too, because it just gives you, you know, how to lock, how to unlock, you know, what you're actually looking for. But if I've got my list of, you know, so up in my bedroom, bathroom, I've got like, I don't know, 30 supplements up there. So, and I've got 3 different windows or mirrors, you know, so I'll scan which mirrors. I go, okay, something behind the 3rd one. And then I'll check like the layer, you know, so I'll go, okay, something on this layer. And then okay, is there a second thing? So I go 1st, 2nd, 3rd. So I work through it bit by bit, but especially I work out the dose of the first thing first. So if you've got a bunch of supplements, for example, and you go, okay, so this one's the priority, how much of that one? And then that, because, you know, just say you needed 5 of it, but you only took 1 of it. That will change what other supplements you need. You know, it's like Angela saying last night, sometimes she needs 1 thing, sometimes she needs 5 things. Well, a lot of it is about dose as well, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
So we might need something like, just say broccoli seed extract, you know, just for example, you know, you might need it, like my friend Linda, you know, when she takes that, she doesn't get jet lag, which is phenomenal for her. It's been such a thing her whole life until she discovered these things. So for her, you know, when she muscle tested up, I can't remember whether it was 5 or 6 the first night she arrived wherever she was, but she's never felt so good in her life after travel. But if she had have taken 1 because she assumed 1 was enough, she wouldn't have felt as good. So, you know, it's like, okay, so this is the first one. Okay, so then how many do I need? And then you need to be clear, Karen, you know, so give me give me a lock, you know, so you need to be clear. Give me an unlock on the correct number of tablets. So then lock and unlock on.
Okay,
so, you know,
that
it's just about
makes
being
sense.
clear for each part of the question.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember when I first learned kinesiology, it was taught the indicator change.
Yes.
That, you know, now I'm in a lock, so I'm looking for an unlock. Now I'm in an unlock, so I'm looking for a lock. And it was just like, my brain can't do this. So now I just always am like, body, we're working from a lock position. And when you unlock, we'll know something's changing here.
That's how I work. That's the opposite to the way Charles Krebs works. Charles Krebs, he always goes to an unlock, and then he goes back to a lock, and then he goes to an unlock, then he goes to a lock, and then he goes to an unlock. He's very linear in the way that he works. So it's it's always fantastic. I always feel like I'm twice as smart every time I see Charles. He's just adorable. When he was over in Perth about 10 years ago, I walked into a room. Yeah, we're just finishing up. I walked into a room and there were some people bitching about his teaching technique, and my brain went, so Mama Lion came out again. I was like, how dare they pick on Charles? Anyway.
Does he have anything on YouTube, Madonna?
He does, but not many. I actually looked him up a few years ago, and there were a few things there, but not very much, and not great ones. You know, because the thing about Charles is you have to experience him. And when he gets on a tangent, he knows so much about everything and that's what I love about learning with him. You know, so he just shares so much information. When I think it was, once again, who knows whether this money is real, but George Bush Sr. apparently put like $1 billion into brain research. So Charles made sure, because he had neurological issues, that he got to know all of the different researchers around the world and kept up with all of their research. So as he was developing kinesiology skills, kinesiology is ahead of the curve medically and scientifically, because the muscle testing shows us things before science does. And Charles has been doing that for 25 years, which is very cool.
Amazing.
Okay, beautiful people. That was my hubby. My meal is ready. Haha. Okay, beautiful.
Thank you so much.
I'll see you all tomorrow night.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.